6 minutes also.
Thanks, Corla. Obviously, it's been a very long day and unusual occurrences in the House. Maybe that's the reason why we had to listen to some pretty peculiar contributions from some of the deputies. But the idea that a deputy would get up and say, well, I think legal aid is okay, I don't really have a problem with it, but it's very annoying when people keep using it, and then go and kind of try and blame the problems of our legal aid system on those people who have the misfortune to be before the court system on multiple occasions. And there is no doubt that that is annoying, but it's a lot more than that. And the idea of penalising people and asking people, as the deputy put forward, to pay for the legal aid themselves is a bit ridiculous when a huge amount of those people come from a background where they wouldn't have the means to pay that anyway. And really the issue should be is, why are there people in a process where they repeatedly offend? And can we do something and put in place measures which avoid that happening? And that is good for the victims of crime, and that is good for society as a whole. Because the reality is, and our statistics of those who appear in front of the courts and those who end up behind bars, is that a majority of those people come from backgrounds where there is a certain hopelessness, a lack of economic progress, a lack of investment and so on. And encouragement in education and investment in communities is far better for society in the long term. Now, I think the concept of restorative justice is a very fundamental and important one, and for me you could kind of summarise it as sort of trying to get people to take responsibility for their actions, because when people take responsibility then they understand more the consequences of the action and they're likely to modify their behaviour accordingly. I note that all research would say that that process should be voluntary, and always should be, and I can appreciate that on one level, I understand that, but I think I can imagine a lot of situations where it wouldn't be the inclination of the perpetrator of the crime maybe to engage in that process, and just having it voluntary mightn't be enough. I think we need to be absolutely proactive in encouraging people to participate in this route, because if people see the damage of their crimes, then to my mind they are less likely to offend, because most people are decent from what I can see, and I think that's an important principle. I got an email this afternoon from somebody not linked necessarily to this issue, but I want to read a bit of it, because the woman called the subject matter of the email victim of a crime, and she started off by telling me her name. And she said that 4 years ago, in February 2010, she was stabbed outside a primary school in Tralee in Kerry. She said, I brought this to the attention of the Gardaí, but nothing was done. 2 years later, in February 2012, the same guy attacked me again, this time outside my house, and caused injury to my face. And once again, the Gardaí failed to pursue it and continued to fail to do anything about it. He was supposed to go to court, but nothing was done. To date, I have no confidence in the Gardaí in this country. I can't go anywhere as I don't feel safe, as this guy may come back and attack me again, or worse, attack my family, as the same guy threatened my youngest son. I would appreciate if you would bring this matter to the attention of the Dáil. Now, what does a victim like that want? Well, the woman wants a right to live in her own community. She wants the right to know that the person who was guilty of the crimes against her was being dealt with. And critically, she doesn't want to feel endangered anymore. But I suppose the question for us is, well, how will that be achieved? And I think the first thing is that the crimes have to be investigated. That is critical. And sadly, myself and Deputy Wallace and Deputy Collins in particular have met over the past period multiple peoples who are the victims of injustice, but who've had that injustice compounded by the fact that the justice system as it presently stands failed them. Their cases either weren't investigated, sometimes they were just tragic incidents that life throws up in people's past, where they become a victim for no real reason. They just end up in that situation because of accidental factors. But what happens next compounds that, and they cannot get closure. And I think the issue of restorative justice is attempting to deal with some of those questions. Now, I do have a problem with the idea of financial compensation. We did discuss it during the passage of the fines legislation, where Minister Shatter was putting forward fines as an alternative to penal sentence. I'm completely opposed to penal sentences in general for most crimes, but I do think that fines in many instances are ridiculous, and community service is a better alternative. I think we need to take into account people's ability to pay. I mean, for an example, most of the crime is committed by people who don't have money. If a junkie breaks into your house to get money to buy drugs, they're not really going to have the money to pay you back if they do that damage. Investing in getting that person off drugs is probably a more sustainable solution. But I'm really in favour of the idea of people meeting those against whom they carried out a crime. An apology can often be the closure that somebody needs. Just being face to face and to have the other person understand the consequences of their actions is hugely important. But we need to move away from just the idea of penal sentences and to take in a much more holistic approach where the victim's interests and the person who carries out the crime are taken into account, so there's less reoffending.